specific to it being a school shooting scenario. Like,
Yeah.
they could have made this exact same movie about a terrorist taking over a grocery store.
Right,
and it would have
and it would
worked.
just been like the only thing they try to do is make it like it's obviously the shooter is one of the teenagers, but even that
Yes.
they don't do anything rather than just like, oh, he was bullied, he was called the names, the slurs, and all that. So he's kind of he's fighting back or whatever in the most horrible way that he possibly could, but it doesn't really dive into like his character besides just him thinking he's smarter than everybody. That's really all he gets. He plays it, the Eli Brown, who's the villain, he kind of plays him like that corny drama kid that watched The Dark Knight one too many times, and like do you know what I'm saying? Like he's kind of got that annoying
what you're
quality to him rather than a intriguing quality to him. Like,
it's a hugely overacted performance.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And compared to everybody else too, he's like the only one putting on this more animated version of things, and I just found it to be a bad choice. And I don't know if it was Eli Brown's choice. It could have been Kyle Rankin, the director. But I just think it was not the way to go. I think that you probably should have taken him as a character more seriously, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it just rubs up against the movie in ways that feel wrong because the rest of the movie, and especially all the other actors in it, it's kind of like a realistic sort of like teen milieu.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's grounded with these kids, and even the space, the way that they film it, it's very grounded in this very, realistically, how would kids with guns take over a school, and how would they do it, like section by section? What would the lockdown procedure look like? Like it's a meant to be, a pretty realistic depiction of, a school shooting scenario, despite the fact that we have like little blonde John McClane running around trying to solve it. But other than her, and and
I thought she was good, by the way, Isabel.
She's got a much better performance, especially because she's doing things that are honestly more ridiculous than what he's doing. But she's making it seem like a real girl, whose dad is a vet who taught her how to shoot and taught her how to be tough. She's her performance is much more grounded in a sense, whereas he just goes like full cartoon amalgamation of like every school shooter that's ever existed. And once again, it's one of those things that by going so broad with it, they remove the specificity of it. So it doesn't have like that scariness that you would think that you would get from a school shooter, where either one, he kind of keeps his mouth shut, so he leaves it vague, which can be scary. Or you just get the hyper specificity of, maybe he has a very specific ideology or, something like that. But instead he doesn't. He just kind of like very broadly just like yells about things. I mean, the first words out of his mouth when they ram the van through the cafeteria, he just yells trigger warning while they're like shooting kids and stuff. And it's one of those things where it's just kind of cringy.
Yeah, that was a weird moment for me, because I heard that, like, I know that the Daily Wire and people associated with that ended up producing this movie, I think, or at least releasing it or something. And
they ended up distributing it or buying the rights to it.
Okay,
because they felt that it was pro the idea of
fighting back.
the real response to a school shooting scenario is having every kid be a little John McClane.
Right, hell yeah. But when I heard that trigger warning part, I was like, that almost seemed like something the Daily Wire would tell them to just put in. and that was really strange for me, because the majority of the movie honestly doesn't have a lot of those weird political Twitter status kind of things. For the most part, he's too silly, but they don't do that. But there's a trigger warning part, and then I think there's a part where they talk about the Nazis.
There's the you heard about how Hitler killed all the disableds. Well, good thing we're not Nazis.
Right.
That's the
and then
big,
he doesn't end up
line that
her.
he gets. That I think is supposed to be like, he's supposed to be a 4chan guy or something, I think is what they're trying to get with the way that he says that line.
Yeah, something along those lines. So that was really strange for me. I was just like, when I heard that trigger warning part, I was like, that's not a good way to open up your character. It's really dated, and that's very cringy. Just don't do that kind of shit.
Yeah, well, and it's weird because, again, besides that moment of kind of him being specific there, again, everything else he does is just so broad. Another one that made me really roll my eyes is when he breaks into one of the lockdown classrooms. And he goes, for those of you just joining us, this is a school shooting. And that was almost like Marvel humor. That was almost like they fly now. That's the way he delivers that line.
Yeah. And it's almost every single line. Every single one. The only times that he's like somewhat intriguing is I did kind of like how they use his attention for social media at a certain point. Like one kid that's holding the camera is like, hey, they're asking questions, and he gets mad because he said don't put comments on, but then his ego trips up and goes like, well, what are they asking? And that kind of starts the snowball of, more people watching and all that kind of stuff.
The whole media sensation aspect of it.
Which, don't get me wrong, it's still done a very simple way, but it was at least somewhat intriguing and somewhat connected to what we see on the news and how these things go. So that was decent, but there's all those parts that are good ideas are very few and far between, and most of it is just like him being incredibly annoying. And most of the time I was just hoping to go back to Isabel, do her thing, because like as much as